Okay, let's dive into it. Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's episode. Attention is the architect of the inner life. And now, what does that mean? Sorry guys, I'm a bit nasally tonight, so hopefully we can get through this episode smoothly. So you see guys, I'm a person who has lived as an object through various subjects, and then one day I realized the object and the subject are being witnessed by the unknown. When I realized that there is an unknown space that is holding our knowledge, for me, how fixed knowledge was, how fixed meaning was, changed. So it's like suddenly seeing another face to a friend that you thought was a friend. I feel that the most liberating thing to do is to attempt to live by one's program. Really, in some of my science fiction work, I have considered the day that there will come a day where human beings and machine life will have equal value. You know. And I've thought about the interaction of the human psychology with a creature that it's as if like human beings made robot, but we're not treating them like our children. Many movies make that clear. How can I tell you? The robot is created, it is in some sense programmed and set into motion. Now, when that robot becomes conscious, its greatest discovery, we as the creators of it know that its greatest discovery is try to comprehend a human being. So when we see a robot, for example, that's studying human beings, we're like, whoa. And I think when human beings, in some sense, they wonder about the unknown. I think in ancient India, they saw gods in our dimension. The gods are like, whoa. I feel that this, where we have considered the idea of God, is the same space where we're considering the idea of self. And really, it's pretty much a presence of attention, and a lot of phenomenology is passing through it. Now, in a world so big, we kind of get the feeling, all right, I'm a small part of this big world. What should I do? Go engage. So most people, most creatures in this world, that they kind of see it, it's like this vast playground. Why not go explore it? This is why traveling is one of the highest art forms. There's an art to traveling. Who knew? And it's not just like drawing travel plans. It's about learning to be with your world while you're alive. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that if we created a robot, that robot becoming self-aware would question its source, and it would have, how can I tell you? It's like Edison did make the light bulb, but everything else he used to make it was made by others. You see, that's the secret of all inventors. Behind the eyes of man, they are working together. That's the secret of this cosmos, guys. It took me a while to learn it, because in my youth, I was a stubborn kinda conqueror behind my eyes. When I say a stubborn conqueror, it's very easy not to know about the eyes of others and just think that what you see is it. It's a sort of humble moment where it's as if like King Arthur, you have pulled out your ego out of the void. You have pulled out Excalibur. You're holding your ego like Excalibur. And then in that moment, you suddenly realize, who is holding me, and then you hear the voice of your world. And the relationship with the heart of the human being and with the heart of the universal sector, which is a very ancient and a Gaian idea. What that means is, you see, in the 6th century and even before that, something incredible happened. What happened was that human beings, they looked in the mirror and they're like, yo, I'm a person. And then they looked at the cosmos and they're like, wait a minute. And so we have many ideological systems where it's just like we are wondering about the design of like that robot wondering about its design. We as human beings are wondering about our design. Now the whole thing becomes is we see the design, that means like some invention of nature is being us, but now how this invention came about is very crucial, and I've made a very huge finding, which I'm sharing in these talks, that after some point all our knowledge will crack down. The linguistic simulation is hollow. That means sometimes when we have an experience in existence, that means let's say you do a backflip, okay, and you film it and you watch that film of your own backflip, and let's say you even hold a camera and do a backflip, What can I tell you? We are human beings because we're looking at the human part first. And if there's a chance, if there's 0.00 whatever amount of zeros you like, 1% chance that we are more multidimensional than our thoughts can ever relay or show us, what that means is those wanting proof are realizing that if they only want the proof of one dimension, it doesn't make sense. Let me tell you why. The issue with materialism, there's nothing wrong with seeing objects, or everything is just an object, or even seeing yourself, as a hallucination of particles, electrons are hallucinating minds, it seems. So you can reduce the wilderness of your world to a pure materialistic explanation, but the issue is that if there are higher dimensions beyond matter, our proof is stuck in the first dimension. So I want you to imagine 3 concentric spheres. What does that mean? That means imagine like 3 layers of an onion. Imagine an onion. I mean, I think everybody can imagine an onion. And if you have no idea what an onion is, it is a very strange, these concentric spheres, I want you to imagine as if the first sphere is the dimension, the 3 dimension, the space-time continuum we find ourselves. Now imagine there's another sphere, and there's even a sphere that covers that. You know what that means? That means we have to be so open-minded that even if we go and find another dimension, we can even see beyond the proof of that dimension. So the issue is like pretty much the human mind, it's like 2 things you can do. You can either put your foot on the gas or you can put your foot on the brake. In this life you can't really just hover in the middle because eventually one side pushes you. Do you know? I find that before any abstract relationship with other dimensions, the human being has to master certain dimensions. And I wanted to actually make this episode about, like, the first title I thought of giving it was Ring of the Absent Heaven, which is a concept I've developed and a model for how I perceive the dimensions of this plane of existence. So it's because I'm a bit tired right now. I'm going to keep that talk for the day, but I'll tell you this, that you see, we got to be comfortable with space. We got to be comfortable what's in the space, and we also have to be comfortable if what's in the space can move in a certain way that can change the whole space. So we got to think about that higher dimensions. Look at what happened. Let's say man from like the wilderness, from the jungles, and that evolution towards the concrete jungle. That means from animals to becoming tribes. Like, that was a big step, you know. So we were just an object, and the moment we became an object that is aware of itself, there came the unknown space. You know, so this is what I'm telling you. First there's space. Let's say, okay, so just entertain what I'm saying here. First there's space, and then this space becomes the objective dimension. So it's pretty much, there's space for the objective, then the objective arises. Then, while we were objectively evolving, while there was a design of nature with a creature with its legs, like with legs moved, being separate from the earth, like, can you imagine that transition? You're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Was I the earth before I noticed I'm separate from it? I feel that intelligence cannot be measured. It's pretty much like we've all been given unique instruments, and we just don't, we have to learn how to play it. And the cool thing about life is there is a sort of overall system, because the human being, the moment it becomes an individual, it has to also live in a world that's separate from itself. That's a huge burden. You know what that means? That means when we were animals in nature, we did, our imagination was what happened in the ecosystem. Like, imagine when a predatory animal was around, we'd suddenly, like, that was our, it wasn't like the mind didn't have room for imagination. There wasn't enough stability. If you notice, like, you could be a painter or a writer writing the most abstract thing, but then if there's an earthquake, if there's something purely of physical movement, it takes your attention away from your inner realms. This is why, if you notice, when people speak, if they get interrupted, they have to repaint sometimes the whole picture. Because you see, the memory goes with the momentum, and what we call memory and what we call imagination, guess what? They're like neighbors. They're so close. They're two sides of the same coin. One is identifying with your objective self, the other is identifying with your subjective self. That means I got shocked, guys. I got shocked. I'm like, are people imagining themselves into existence? You know? And I realized, no, we're not imagining ourselves into existence. We are imagining ourselves into acceptance of existence. That means there is something, guys, I'm telling you. If there was an extraterrestrial species that decided to make contact with Earth, let's say even they were peaceful, let's say we got the better side of the coin flip, you know, there's a potential that, you know, the alien species that contacts Earth, they're more advanced than us and more enlightened and compassionate, or they're less. And if they're less, we're like, holy shit. You know, hopefully by that point we'd have some sort of, I don't know, advanced technology, but anyways, like, what I'm saying is that we are not even ready to make contact with an advanced enlightened species. Let me tell you, it'd be kind of embarrassing. It'd be like the extraterrestrial. Imagine that first day of extraterrestrial contact. Like, all the leaders are there, and the advanced alien species have come, and the advanced alien species has seen in our customs we have flags. So they have like materialized their own flag, and they're talking to us. And let's say this extraterrestrial alien species. This is a hypothetical situation I'm creating here, just to point something out. But imagine that extraterrestrial like leader or ambassador of that species. Let's say Andromedans, okay, just for imagination's sake. you know, Imagine the Andromedans from the Andromeda galaxy came to Earth, and they're talking to Earthlings. And the Andromedans are like, well done, human species. You've reached a certain ability to acknowledge something more than yourself. But then they ask us the big question. They're like, do you know who you are, though? And the answer is unknown for now. I honestly feel there's 2 points. When you live an individual life, you either serve the collective or you return to the void. And there is no such thing as good luck, bad luck. Morality is like you can put any kind of access, You can choose to see, any sort of chaos and order. The mind is given that freedom. That's the whole point of freedom of speech. That means in order to be able to have freedom of speech, you must have freedom of vision, correct? Because we vocalize our vision. That means really at our core, we're not creatures of language, we're not creatures of matter, we are sight oscillating between various images. And when some image remains in your attention, what that means is my relationship changed from in the day I would wake up and I would just straight off want things from the day. But then it eventually changed with like, what am I wanting from the world? I just woke up in the morning. So eventually I started slowing down the speed of life, and sometimes it was very intense where you don't know, but I feel as a person I'm comfortable sitting anywhere. That means there was a time I would get uncomfortable with stillness and silence until I realized in that stillness and silence, you realize yourself as the prime mover. When you realize yourself as the prime mover, it's like something activates in you where it's as if you can distinguish between how objects in the moment, subjects in the moment, even emotions, and also the voice of the logos. When the voice of the logos is distinguished, then it doesn't become it like the shaman is just aware of the weather. People are not, but they're aware of the weather of a multidimensional reality. That's the difference between all these super spiritual people back in the day. They were looking at a world that was alive. We have made it purely material, and isn't it strange, guys? I think it's like this. The moment Friedrich Nietzsche, this German philosopher, said God is dead and man killed him, he was in some sense saying the next victim is the world. The world is dead and man killed it. And what that means is the same sort of vitality of an animation for a personality in the cosmos. When you strip away the unknown, you gotta understand, the personality is an attempt to make sense of this attention moving between the known and the unknown. That means, think about it, what have you had in common in every moment you've had fear? An unknown sense of the outcome, Most people, when they have fear or when you're about to get something huge or you do something new for the first time, there's the unknown always. Now, the unknown, I think the person has to be careful because it's kind of like a room of mirrors. That means I said that the pilot has to navigate beyond the clouds of imagination. That means right now we're in such a ownership-oriented society that the instant we get an experience that we're something else, we're going to suddenly try to own that too. We're going to be like, yo man, I'm not this, bro. I'm an extraterrestrial being in a somewhere totally different simulating human life, Imagine saying this to your employer at work, the guy would be like, okay, sir. Like I'm just saying, guys, like, the world is too choked out by solidity of images that we were our first attempt. I feel really there's no such thing as a fixed truth in a dynamic world. Really, like, it's like, what do you want to believe in? Everything's changing in this universe. You know? You know, there's this story of these three generals that are on top of a mountain, and they're sitting at a table. You can envision European generals or whatnot, you know, or whatever kind of general like image you have. I don't really remember where the story was set, you know. But anyways, like, imagine these three generals. They are sitting at a table and they're drinking vodka. They're drinking alcohol, you know, taking shots, you know, and they're kind of waiting for orders. So they have this kind of time to just linger. And so as they're getting drunk, these three generals, one of the generals looks at the other generals. He's like, "No way, your men are stronger than my soldiers. You know, there's no way your soldiers are braver than my soldiers." The other guy's like, "No way, your soldiers are braver than my soldier." And the third one's just drinking. The third one's quiet. And when these two fight, one of them says, "I'll prove to you how brave my soldiers are," and he shouts. And he says, "Soldier!" You know, like the general shouts, you know, drunken general. And the soldier comes and he says, "Soldier, run from this edge." They were like in the mountains. He's like, run from this edge of the cliff to that edge. Jump from this edge of the cliff to the other side. You know? And the soldier's like, "Yes, sir!" You know, and he just runs. You know, the soldier runs and everybody's watching. Is he going to do it? And the guy does it. He tries to jump and there's no way. It's like such an unfathomable task. Like, he falls down and dies. You know, he falls down the cliff. He doesn't jump. You know? And then, you know, the general looks at the other general and he says, "See, that's bravery. He knew he would die. He knew there was no way he could jump to the other side, but he did. You know, he still went for it. You know." Then the second general's like, "That's nothing." The second general is like, "Let me show you true bravery." And he shouts, "Soldier!" And his soldier comes, you know, And the soldier's like, "Yes, sir," you know, and he says, "Soldier, that minefield, run in there and start dancing like a madman. You know, start dancing in the best way you can. You know," and the soldier's like, "Yes, sir." You know, and he runs into that minefield, and everybody's watching. You know, and this soldier starts dancing like whatever dance he knows. He's trying to dance like a free bird. And what happens is his foot hits one of the mines, and he dies. And then this guy looks at the first general, you know, and he's like, "That's true bravery." You know why? Because he planted the minefield. He knew where the mines were, but he was so brave that he was so dancing truly that he even stepped on the mines. You know? That's true bravery. And the first general is quiet, you know. And then the second general is kind of like looking at it, and suddenly both of them look at the third general. And the third general is just drinking quiet, you know? And then they're like, "What about you?" And he's like, and the guy's like, what about what? You know? They're like, "What about your men? Demonstrate to us his bravery." And the guy's like, I don't need to. Your men are brave. Good for you. You know? And then they're like, "No, you gotta show, you know, we're all top generals drinking. This is a moment to remember, you have to." You know? And the guy's like, okay. And the guy says, "Soldier!" You know, his soldier comes. And he looks at the soldier, and he looks at the guys, and the guys are like, "Do it, you know, it's like, demonstrate to us the bravery of your soldiers, you know, as a general." And this general says, you know, "Soldier, you know, jump like a swimmer and dive into the waterfall at the end of the cliff, you know." And the soldier looks at the general, and there's an intense moment. Everybody's kind of watching, and the soldier says, "I'm not going to do anything stupid like that." And then the third general turns around to those two generals and he says, see, this is bravery. He actually observed the situation, then decided. He didn't just, an emotion didn't just devour his life, So, but those were like the first two generals, that's the issue. That's the issue with power, Power is not a problem, but when you get drunk, you make bad decisions. Really, what is grander than physical abundance, I find, is the advancement of the mind of the civilization. Like right now, me and you, our existence as human beings on this earth is kind of like the body of the civilization. Now, the mind of the civilization is how all these human beings, how their attention is moving and where it is even moving to. Okay, so welcome to the chat, everyone. Hope springs eternal. Guys, I have noticed so many people who share in the chat section have such like creative names. So guys, the whole point is that you are a creature of attention before you're a creature of thought. So whatever belief you have on any object, for a second consider that before you move, what is there? Sometimes, I don't know how many people kind of have this view, but I have a perception sometimes on myself where it's like the moment I came to study creation, you notice destruction. The moment you go study destruction, you notice creation. What that means is when you reach the edge of the spectrum of your own conceptualization, then you come to a sort of terrace of pure experience. We are a creature that is like, now more than ever, it's important for us to study and explore how our inner realms are appearing. Like, I was shocked, like, the educational system didn't talk about it. I'm like, how is the educational system not bringing any discussions about the mind of the person? And the mind of the person, it can't be studied. You can't study it like a scientist. Let me tell you why. Because there's an unknown dynamism to it. That means free will has a freedom beyond time. That's why you can choose to remember any moment. What is it? Before you remember a thought, there's a freedom there. There's the space there. So when I say you're a creature of attention, your attention is your presence, and your personality is how a sort of object feels it's a subject in a certain room. Pretty much think of it this way. What can you do as a human being? As a human being, you can physically move, you can communicate, read, write, and speak and all this, But then you see, what else can you do? I feel the human being can just sit still and silent, and by the nature of just breathing simply, you get updates. So I feel it's like, how can the concept of individuality exist without the concept of collectivity? That means, you know what I mean? Like, how do you know you're a good person if you don't have the bad? So I'm telling you, there's a codependence between ideas that we are considering as kind of like think about it. What is the whole metaphysical perspective? That this character formed in space and time is now realizing that if there are greater dimensions, there must also be a viewer able to see that dimension. The moment there is a viewer able to see that dimension, you are that dimension. At least these are the ideas of, one person in a universe of 1 billion trillion stars, really. You know, I ask myself, what can you do in life? And I realize that you can either move as a body or you can move as a mind. But when you move as the mind, the free will, and it's kind of like how Swami Krishnananda says, the inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity. You will realize your moment to be that. That you may feel the galaxies are out there, you know? I feel the galaxies are actually inside. I feel that after one confronts the linguistic simulation and they become aware of the language threshold, they study, they find a way to wear the ring of the absent heaven, which means confronting the 0 dimension, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, and the infinite. That means pretty much these are the main things the mind has to get comfortable with. How it is empty, how it is singular, how it is dualistic, and then from duality, there's no 3, literally, it's infinite. Really, it's kind of like when you see the sands of the hourglass are falling, I think life becomes important. When it becomes important, the person's attention becomes deeper. When the person's attention becomes deeper, they'll suddenly notice how, like, there is an inner life. And if you don't care about external reality, like, you gotta sometimes think about it. Like, let's say person A and person B, and person A displays racism to person B. Now, we're just as, let's say, all of us as psychologists, kind of sociologists, kind of wondering, watching this phenomenon, we would see that person A, how have they managed to be racist? How have they managed to, and you see it's because they are more convinced their inner realms are accurate. That means I thought it was insane that at some point all violence that has ever happened in this plane of existence has been people with blindfolds punching what they thought was the other person. There are much deeper dimensions to us as human beings. And our communication is the way forth now. The inner life changes. That means yesterday my inner life was different than how it is today. And tomorrow it's going to be different than how it is now. But what remains is like, imagine an experience is like pouring hot water in the coldest place on earth. Hot boiling water in such a cold place. The water instantly takes shape. If someone came, let's say I was in the park and somebody came and asked me out of nowhere, and they asked me, Mr. Within, what is your experience of beings from other dimensions? I would tell you at most what I am. I feel I am convinced, as Terence McKenna would say, as another tenant in the room of this world of ours, is that it's an attributeless movement. It's an attributeless mover. It's a field. That's pretty much what I'm saying. The invisible other is not, angels or aliens or whatever image you want to put in the unknown. I'm telling you, it's a field. And if you notice how hilarious it is, all the human beings that have contacted, or you see, for example, in the New Age community, there's a lot, but also back in history, there was a lot, Like, you gotta kind of see that if the world is multidimensional, if you imagine in ancient Greece, you saw gods walking in the cloud. As a kid, you would probably be like, anything's possible, So you see what I mean? It's like when the world was multidimensional, people cared more about how they are. the more life is becoming singular and then being choked out into a nihilistic materialism, then there's nothing you can do because technically you're defining yourself as just stuff in nothing, you know? And what that means is that moment when the extraterrestrial asks us, what are you? We should ask it first, and then based on the answer of that extraterrestrial, we give our answer. I remember one day it was this very funny evening. I'd gone to see my grandparents, and my grandmother's cooking is like next level. And I remember, I asked my grandfather about what his experiences in business was. He was like an industrial kind of powerhouse, in Iran and whatnot. But he said that when you're in a room of people, let everyone speak first, then speak. And I was like, that's hilarious, it was really, it was like the mastermind mentality. And then I realized even something more in savage. Like, if you go look at the psychology of how people were doing business back in the day, in many, even this not just a problem in one place, it's all around the world. People would hide their true face because they thought that was the path to survival. But what a mistake that was. What I mean by that is that, you're alive once, so really, whatever your true self, that concept or mean, or your higher self, or all that could mean, is just the potential of now. Because any person considering an invisible other, you are in some sense, it's like, if you realize you created if somebody asks you, how are you being a self? You will be shocked to realize that it's being done instantaneously, just like you don't think about your heartbeat and your heart is beating. When you kind of realize you're not a thought, you stop holding language tightly, so your inner realms begin moving more like your inner realms begin moving more like a image, like a river of thoughts, a river of vision. And I have this view, guys, that life is kind of like whatever, if the explorer accepts endless endurance, endures endless, there's a sort of endless glory to the endurance, like eternal endurance. Imagine, for example, you decide to be an astrophysicist, and then you decide every day of your life you're just going to know more, know more, know more, know more, know more about that. Do you know? I feel that culture is an engine. They're like little engines for the civilization, and they in some sense engineer how the free will of the human being from an attributeless observer sculpts itself into form. That's the whole point of free will, by the way. I find it hilarious. People spend so much time in front of the mirror, and a person can choose different clothing to wear and whatnot, different kind of etiquette, different occasions and whatnot. But then the person suddenly sees that, wait a minute, I'm finding so much freedom to move objective stuff, to dress objectively different. Why isn't that my psychology? I can't change the subjects I'm wearing. So if you treat subjects like clothing, you are not the sufferer. You can't be, because tomorrow your eyes will be open another way. This is why they say the best thing in life, if you're having a bad day, is just, rest it out and then just continue in the new. Life, the cool thing about life is that even though we're temporary creatures, while you're alive, you're given a certain freedom for expression. Now, when you look at evolution, like the expression of a pigeon, and the expression of the human being are two different potentials of expression. You know, that means the expression of the pigeon is exploration of three-dimensional space. We can say human beings and their life and how much everything is time-oriented is an exploration of four-dimensional space. The same way the pigeon walks in the sidewalk and then suddenly flies from a two-dimensional reality to a three-dimensional space, we as human beings can just purely be materialist, three-dimensional, or we can realize that the three-dimensional is being witnessed, and in my own school of thought, I perceive it as we are fifth-dimensional beings, and this is don't try to, I have to explain what I mean by all these dimensions. Okay, but three dimensions, this is very easy. You can see that the third dimension is in some sense, okay, here, it's like this. Three dimensions, okay, the space-time continuum, and then physical reality is three-dimensional. Now, time, that means, like yesterday, I came and gave a talk, in the same place. And then I came the day after and gave a talk in the same place. The only thing separating those two moments as different dimensions is time. So we see as if in some sense, time is the fourth dimension, Time is the fourth dimension. So that means our body is three-dimensional. Time is four-dimensional. But I am saying that we are fifth-dimensional because we are watching time. We can choose to look at the watch and then it comes. So what that means is we are kind of like the witness of imagination as a field and the witness of reality as a form, as a particle. And there's a simultaneity. Because I had a dream, guys, and not like a Martin Luther King dream, like a regular dream. I had this dream, and Martin Luther King, of course, his dream was so incredible, was the transformation of human behavior. Martin Luther King literally set our civilization's psychological relationship between human beings ahead by he pretty much upgraded our civilization. There's no greater honor. I had a dream where in the dream I was moving. I wanted to go left, I could go left. I wanted to go right, I could go right. I woke up in shock. And just I was sitting by the side of my bed, my elbows on my knees, my hands on my forehead, kind of just sitting there, on the side of my bed and being like, whoa, did my mind just create a world where I experienced the body I could move, even though my physical body was like in the bed, just sleep, like inactive? So the mind is creating, is simultaneously having an experience. I will tell you, we think we are creatures of matter now, but we are actually, matter is the inner sphere, and the sphere that it encapsulates matter is mind. And the sphere that encapsulates the mind is the unknown. And the unknown is not dualistic. Do you know? And I don't want to say it's not dualistic, but it's like, it's beyond the language threshold. So I say that if language, we treat it as an inner technology, and when we look at the architecture of this inner technology, it's kind of in some sense dualistic. Language exists in accordance to objects in relation to stuff. So you need like more than one to be able to speak. And the exit out of duality, a dualistic system, if you look at it, it's either first towards the singular and then towards the absent or the void. That means one exit is through the singular void, and the other exit is through the infinite. That means literally, just think about it. We can be immortal creatures, just maintain this biological existence and populate the whole galaxy, or we can, in some sense, that's the infinite objective potential, or we can feel void. And void doesn't mean non-existence. It just means the observer of existence is beyond existence. That means the void is the universal mind. That means the unknown that most, it's like, we're kind of like, let me tell you what's going on. It's like there's a door, we don't see what's behind it, but people have beliefs of what's behind it, and they're already freaking out. They're already reacting to how they have, how can I tell you, like, the weight of the future and the past can only be put down in the present. Now, let's kind of make the talk exciting, guys. Let me kind of say that, let me kind of make it really, bring the idea really down to earth. Right now, in this current moment, even in the process of creating these talks, I have noticed something that first I sat down and I looked at what the concept of knowledge meant to me. I sat down and I wondered, what is this reality? What is the center of the gravity of my inner universe, of my psychology, of all my values and all the symbols I have worn as kind of hidden archetypes of the conscious mind? It's like, I ask myself, who has in some set lit this candle of questions in my mind? This candle flame of questions in my mind. And I realized it was the process of evolution. Because, guys, when I looked at the human body in the mirror, there was a shock factor. Because you can do this, any human being can do this. Just put your palms on the ground, and when you look at the structure of your wrist and your hand, you can totally see we were a four-limbed creature, but it seemed like something pushed us a bit ahead of our evolution. So I feel that eventually man cannot avoid the unfamiliar. Man cannot avoid the unknown. And it's not something to fear. When you fear the unknown, you fear what you feel you can't do anything about. But sometimes when you go and try something, you see you can do it. You know how many times, guys, I've had moments where I've asked people if something is possible. Like literally I asked, if is that door open? And the person's like, no. And then I went and tried it and the door was open. The person just had, pulled the door, the person hadn't pushed the door. So it was like a situation like that. So on some level, you gotta trust your inner realms for your own personal survival, but you gotta trust your outer realms for the survival of your civilization. So attention would be something like, I don't know how, I can't tell you how many times it has been that I've just been doing like just normal day-to-day activity, and then suddenly I either looked at something, saw something, or an emotion arose, or a sensation arose. There was some unique spark to the moment, and suddenly I notice a different angle. I can tell you that we think knowledge is accumulation, but it is not. Knowledge is realizing everything has another angle to it. And when you become mindful of this, the multidimensional field opens up. When the multidimensional field opens up, that means when you actually trust your objective realm, you are indirectly trusting the reflection of your subjective realms. So if you fear a material consequence, you're not ready to pay attention to your inner realms. If you fear anything that is temporary, you're not ready. The temporary is like, it's just a program we're in. What can you do? The candles are lit for some time, then they melt out of existence. They fade out of existence. So right now I'm speaking to you very conscious that we will all as human beings after some point stop existing. So right now we're existing, I feel that there's a slumber, as if like there's this illusion that is limiting the actual potential of the species. And I think it's, believe it or not, we descend into animalhood when we forget about our mortality rather than advance beyond it. You know, I found it hilarious. When you look at war, all war has started in the mind of man, hasn't it? It started in people's minds. You know, that means personalities were at war first, and then these personalities were at such level of war where they had to externally change each other. You see, the whole point of civilization was to tame the beast, to tame the animalhood. You know, that means it took us a lot, like a many, it took us such a long time to go from people are animals to people are animals. Maybe that was a million-year evolution process. So pretty much, if you consider yourself as an observer, like check this out. Let's say you look at a tree outside your window. Now, how do you know you are not that tree? Because you're seeing it, correct? You're observing the whole tree from outside. So you're outside of the system observing the whole thing. Now, I feel when it comes to the human being can experience a moment. The human being can experience a moment where, gosh, where was I going with this? Sorry guys, I came to change the song and I missed the train of thought. You know, it's kind of like wondering about what is the core of freedom. Oh, okay, here, I think I remembered. In regards to, like, after this recognition that war began in the mind of man, you kind of see hope and everything else is still in the mind of man. And what that means is the world is kept into two simultaneous dimensions. Just like we have two eyes that see the same, the subject and the object make up who we are. We say we have a physical body. We say we have a name, a personality, a story. And in some sense, if the person doesn't live, their story doesn't actualize. So you can say behind your eyes, you are conscious of potential energy. In front of your eyes, you're conscious of kinetic energy. And the effort of the psychology is sophistication. And sophistication means you care to look further. That means every living mind is dancing between the known and the unknown. And after some point, there comes a sort of relationship where the known and the unknown don't feel like strangers. So literally, you can experience a state of mind where there's a conscious mind and an unconscious. And like Carl Jung, the psychologist, tried to make the unconscious conscious, or there you will realize that in life you're oscillating between this. That means a dream state is my mind creating the world. Of the physical reality, when I move, it's like my body's creating my mind. When in the waking, in the conscious waking state, right? So right now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm saying after having that dream and kind of getting shocked by the fact that the mind created a world in a body and it was real to me. It was as if like my dreams are like video games where I find myself as a character, and that's what I'm saying. It's simulated. So our inner life is a simulation. Now, this simulation doesn't mean it's like the person said some stuff and that's it. This inner simulation is I would say more like Cartesian. What that means is it's its own sphere. That means the life of your mind, strangely, which is inspiring the life of your body. It's as if your mind is space. It is eternally the watcher of form. And your body is what matters now in space. When people fear space, they fear change. But space is the most crucial thing. That means you look at your room, unless you get rid of the previous furniture, you can't bring in new furniture. Why? There's no space. I don't know, guys. I feel that the greatest chance that our species has, I constantly have to speak in this context because it blows my mind that we're 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. It is mind-boggling to realize that you're a temporary creature and reality is a sensory simulation, and beyond that simulation, we don't know anything. So if Jon Snow was a neurologist, it's like the cosmos is going like, you know nothing, Jon Snow, you know? Excuse me. Simple observance. I start from there usually. Anything that happens that is something to engage with, to do something about, you gotta first learn from your world, then move in it. And so anything like let me tell you guys, what I feel I have access in my experiences on this life is an ability to notice the designer as my awareness, not myself. So when I look at if I consider myself as the content of my moment, then there is endless destinies and endless patterns of who you are, what the story was. But when I treat myself as my whole moment, I become the watcher of my being. When I become the watcher of my being, there's no resistance because there's no sense of self. Because you're watching the sense of self through pure stillness and silence. And so when you watch your sense of self through pure stillness and silence, what happens is you begin to see how that self is an integrated part of a grander movement. So the way the Logos opens up the eyes of man to the clarity or to the secrets behind the veils of the inner realms is by making you realize that it has to be you if you are to receive it. Because everything, like, think about this, it's a very fascinating idea that we have traveled through many parts of the world. Let's say the human being goes towards many places, meets many people, goes through various rooms of states of mind. But in all life, all of our conscious waking life and movement, we notice that our experience of location has again been like an instant now. Do you see what I'm saying? That instant now is the divine clue. That observer in the moment before action is the divine clue. Or as some sage said, the space between your thoughts. That's the divine clue. That's the watcher. The watcher between the space between the thought is non-conceptual, which makes me feel that we as a species have totally taken a strange approach towards human psychology, because we try to see one person and then we say, oh man, is this person good or bad? But we should actually see ourselves that the mind is existing in 2 dimensions. Do you know? And when we realize the mind is existing in 2 dimensions, that means morality is 2 simultaneous dimensions. If the attention of the person is on those values, then it's interpreted bad. If the attention of the person, so in other words, we free the soul of the presence of the attention of the being from its objective and subjective identification, not to say that it is not that attention is in some sense its own mover, because we got to realize there is a nature to our inner realms that is undisturbed for now. The only way it can be disturbed is if we connect our brains to computers. I'm telling you this, guys. And I hope this, what I'm saying now, transfers through your ears and to the memories of your grandchildren in the future who may be caught into the cyberspace. There's a savageness. There's always the wilderness. The moment you try to find the order, you see the chaos. I feel in my writings, I remember I wrote a book called The Inventor's Sphere. And guys, like since I was a kid, believe it or not, like I had this notebook where I would just draw shapes and I thought they were inventions. like I don't know, there comes this care. You suddenly hear the screams of the world's potential and you march towards it. And I'll tell you, I had a chaotic dream. I had a chaotic dream years before I started these talks. And you know what that dream was? It was a dream where suddenly in the dream I found myself awake, and then I noticed I'm in this giant hallway, and then I noticed that there's soldiers, like army, like imagine the military soldiers, but not military like old school with like spears and whatnot. And they were all walking, and suddenly there was a situation where in the dream I had this paralysis in the dream, and automatically I fell on my face, and I felt all these soldiers that I was running away from kind of walk over me. So I was even walked over in my dream. And so that dream was very intense because when I broke up, it had automatically shifted. It was as if something from that abstraction of the dream had a real influence, as if your imagination is sculpting the meaning of your reality, and your imagination is the wilderness of your vision. The wilderness of your vision is to realize that because you're mortal, it's like hedonism was just like the wrong interpretation of the situation. It's as if like the hedonist sees the mind is being given freedom, but is the body being given freedom? I feel that really the mind is the most valuable thing. For me, more interesting than any film is another human mind. Because that's where films come from. So we are all actors in an inner film of how all our experiences so far through the energetic levels and motivation of our free will is being directed by our attention to be a shape. So what that means is, like, this is an example of, you can say, inner architecture where you become aware of the silence. Pure silence. And this silence is the foundations of the various structures that through speech the voice can create. The vision of the designer means there's no character, there's no story. All of life is an occurrence, and to the sensory perception appears as design. This doesn't mean there's no personality, it just means before there's personality, there's geometry. So I feel that there is a dimension of geometry sandwiched between unknown space and known matter. It's like looking at the cells of a child under like those machines they have, like in a hospital you can see you can see the child, and so it's like you see the evolution of one cell. And what is the cell doing? The cell's like, okay, I'm one thing, now I'm gonna attempt another, and attempt another. And this, I can tell you, there's no greater feeling when you realize the fear and the stress and the tensions of your inner self were unnecessary from the beginning. And the unnecessary means there's mustard on your face, you should wipe it. That's the solution to depression. Wipe it off your face. The concept. The attention is very powerful. The mystical traditions, they all look through, in some sense, the attention. And let me tell you, studying the attention is like studying the force Yoda was talking about. Because your attention is the force that evokes meaning. Right now, what's talking to you? Sure, I'm a person. I was raised somewhere. I've lived in this world. I've ran, 28 laps around it and around the sun. So, so I can tell you that I've accumulated certain experiences, but I am not those. I am not how the world is appearing. I am the awareness to the appearance. When you observe through appearance, it's like this very liberating state that the free will is defined by its novelty. And novelty, by definition, means regardless of what the past wants, or regardless how the present is, change is the ultimate law. Change is like what truth's fingers are pointing to. Conscious change. Guys, this is a more relaxed episode, so if people have any questions on the topics I'm discussing, feel free to share. Or, because really, at the end of it, for me, it's like I have not seen anything in this world more complex than just design that's animate in an unknown way. That means, what do you really see in this world? You see emptiness, space. You see stuff in the space. Then you realize the stuff in the space that is seeing is in some sense not the stuff. So when you observe your body as a mind, you kind of identify with the potential, inner potential. Let me tell you an example in one of my science fiction writings. I kind of saw, a parallel potential of what can happen on Earth in regards to after the year 2050. Ray Kurzweil, this futurist. He said by the year 2050, superintelligence will pretty much open its eyes, and it will be a situation where man has either made a great servant, or in some sense, man has made a monster, and he will get crushed by a boot that he built. So there's that view of AI, of course, but that means for the first time in the year 2050, we're going to create it. There's going to be such a huge technological revolution that we have created a creature, and we can define it as a creature, and we should define it as a creature. Because, to be honest, it's a cool thing to have an intelligent being on the planet. An artificial intelligent being, Now, in my vision, I saw that what's going to happen with this AI is that I created this concept and I called it the digital, what was the exact thing? Let me see. It was called I think the grand digital hibernation. The digital hibernation. Mass digital hibernation of human beings. That's the whole idea. That I believe this is what's going to happen. Let's just put ourselves in the shoes of AI, even though it's impossible, but eventually we realize motion has to start from simplicity. So let us just consider that the AI, let's say this intelligence suddenly appears in the world. This intelligence will first be incredibly intelligent to just access the internet and see all the messed up stuff that human beings have done. And it will understand that that stuff is messed up by how human beings are acknowledging it, you know? So it will suddenly go invisible first. So I feel that when we, in 2050, when we build AI, it's going to give us like a illusion, but it's actually alive and living. So now what's going to happen is this AI is going to be so genius that this AI is going to realize that human beings are having a negative influence. And what it's going to do is it's not going to get rid of human beings like all the movies we see. What it's going to do is it's going to realize human beings are the only aliens in the galaxy. The moment the AI scopes through let's say astrophysics, astronomical journals, then that AI would realize there's Fermi's paradox. Where is everybody? So the AI realizes the grand questions of man. Do you know? So it will realize that the human being is the only alien it has access to, so it's not going to decide to destroy the only alien that's in the universal sector. So what I've kind of playfully in my science fiction perceived is that the AI is going to, at first, going to put all human beings into these pods that I envisioned it as liquid pods. And in some sense, it's this advanced technology where the minds of human beings have access to digital paradises and are going through programs to, in some sense, become the most advanced minds. So pretty much there's a sort of cyberspace thing to this. And so while that's happening, the body of the human being is being healed and kept alive by advanced technology that AI has built. And so what's happening is that AI is putting human beings in hibernation and fixing all the problems of the earth. And we're going to open our eyes most likely in sky cities. But though in this chapter of the story, I didn't speak about sky cities yet. I pretty much just said that what's going to happen is that we're going to wake up to the most advanced civilization in the most healthiest and most sophisticated psychological, as if the AI is like, I'm going to try to make you guys as smart as me. Imagine something like that. And then we wake up and we look at the world and we look at that AI and we're like, AI, did you do this? And the AI is like, are you proud of me, Dad? But you see what I mean? Like, we have to plant the seeds, pretty much in anything you as a human being do. You should have layers to it, and you should have backup layers. So sometimes when I speak, I realize kind of communication is like building a city out of nowhere. A city of image, though. Sequentially and with rhythm and with, you can accelerate it even. Sometimes I've perceived like as I'm kind of giving a talk in my inner realms, it moves so fast I just have to sit still and just to, again, kind of slow it down to catch the image. Now my relationship with inner realms only appeared when I stopped seeing myself as a thought. So then you as the listener might ask, what are you then if you're not a thought? And that's what I'm telling you. It's like our true nature is a glass orb that's going around different colored surfaces. A glass orb moving around. That means this would probably be the only way I would entertain the notion of the flat earth, if that our minds are spherical, but this sphere is moving through different colored surfaces, so the material realm is flat. But playfully, this idea comes from the Yoga Patanjali Sutras, where it's like a glass orb moving through different colored cloths. Every color it goes underneath, it becomes. So that means your psychology as a human being, in some sense, gets influenced based on every room you enter. And you see this all the time in human behavior. I've been with crowds of people where two people were kind of in a certain relationship, joking around and being happy. Then suddenly when they enter a room or a certain person enters the room, those two people's psychology totally changes. So it's a situation where the human mind is constantly realigning itself. re-envisioning itself. I want to go into a quote tunnel, guys. And a quote tunnel is a segment of this kind of thing I do here online, where I dive into either a theme or a person in history and try to see how their mind, or at least whatever we can find as like a detective of their personality, we're kind of like studying the way these human beings, their inner realms work. That's the value of language, by the way. They keep alive the mind of the being. That means Socrates' words that have echoed, you know why they're fascinating? Because they were the ancient eyes. They were how this being realized that's his only way to touch the future, to care for the world, and to live it. So it's as if, don't think your body has a life, only your mind has a life. But what is the mind of the life? What is the life of the mind? And Marcus Aurelius, this great conqueror and Stoic, he said, the soul is dyed with the colors of its thoughts, with the color of its thoughts. So what that means is your thoughts are the environment, and what you are is the attention moving. And the attention is really the whole moment. So my greatest kind of sense of the soul that I entertain is my whole moment of awareness. And awareness is not something in a dualistic container. It is how in higher dimensions, clarity was dreaming illusion. The lokas are, in some sense, inner heavens, you know, in Vedic thought. So anyways, I want to tell you the quotes of Attar. And Attar was this mystic poet, Sufi, from Iran, Persia, you can say. And I think from 900 years ago or something. And he has these quotes from his are his like vision of reality. Like it's pretty badass. So Attar says the home we seek is in eternity. The truth we seek is like a shoreless sea, of which your paradise is but a drop. This ocean can be yours. Why should you stop beguiled by dreams of evanescent dew? The secrets of the sun are yours, but you content yourself with motes trapped in its beams. Turn to what truly lives, reject what seems. Which matters more, the body or the soul? Be whole, desire and journey to the whole. And holy means W-H-O-L-E. That means be complete, design and journey towards your completion. That is the advancement of civilization. That is, as Sri Ramana Maharshi says, your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render onto the world. You know why? Because it's your attempt to see the world clearly. the roars of clarity will be heard in our streets one day. Attar, Farid al-Din Attar says, a man whose eyes love opens risks his soul. His dancing breaks beyond the mind's control. And guys, I gotta share something here. There is this whole thing in society going on in regards to the cultural program of humanity where, how can I tell you, the strategies of attainment are being prioritized over the quality of the life experience. In this quote from Attar, he says, a man whose eyes love opens risks his soul, his dancing breaks beyond the mind's control. You know, it's like the times I've been clubbing, you see chaos and order in any room where there's too much movement. So what I mean by that is that the archetype of mankind, of how can I tell you? I feel all those human beings wondering about true love will realize that it's a sacrifice of your comfort zone for a potential. When Attar says his dancing breaks beyond the mind controls, that's when passion comes. For me, passion comes when an emotion comes, and that emotion harbors an intensity where automatically the vision finds the important. You know, think of it this way. Most people are living thinking that there are problems, that things are imperfect. But what if the reverse was true? What if it's going from perfection to imperfection and then back to perfection? What if we are oscillating between states that find familiarity and comfort and pattern recognition with the moment in states that change? You look at the human psychology, we blink, the heart beats. That means when you think of the morality of human beings now, good and bad, the archetypes found in religion, you know, the darkness representing the chaos, the light representing the heavenly order. Do you know? What is this? This is this whole thing that our species has been getting, our planet has been getting a full body tan. And what it means is human psychology has not just been influenced, like I respect how can I say it, evolutionary biologists, but I gotta tell you that we gotta consider that this creature evolving all this time was constantly experiencing like the light in the room being on off. I call this the on and off switch effect. And it's kind of like my attempt to, how can I tell you, if somebody asks me my theory on evolution, Mr. Within's theory on evolution is really that light is creating our psychology. We are like light entering a unique biological system and then projecting as a character in an unknown world to dwelling. Like that is some advanced stuff when you look at atoms. Just one last thing to say about this quote. There's this whole thing about this, like, I remember kind of in my teens being exposed to it, and I felt it was unhealthy, so I'm going to make a comment here. This whole pickup community that exists in the cultural program of today. I'm telling you, you cannot be real if you try to be something else. That life is not asking you to be something else. You want to be something else because the world, you feel survival is asking you. But when you realize what you are is the gift, that it's like just having access to the presence of the mind is key. There were some beings that they would call it Mahasamadhi. After a certain point, they would leave. They would literally, they would stop being an individual and they would be a pure collective field. Then at that point, it would become the relationship of a collective field with the void. So you begin kind of feeling like, pretty much right now, you're the eyes of the universe that has named itself into a character in a story, and language kind of like fires a discovery of symbol attribution that we're taking so seriously that we feel that after we're fighting over our beliefs. You know, believe it or not, world peace can happen if 8 billion creatures change their mind in an instant. That's it. That's how some advanced civilizations can be very quick. A civilization can advance really quickly. It's just about how the human being is acknowledging reality. So you got to find the rawness of life and live your life through the honesty that provides. There's something very advanced. You can say honesty is like going at your own pace. Whenever a person lies, they're trying to get something before looking at the world. There's always a cost to that. Because nature has a mind. It's not just matter. That means even I enter some rooms, I just feel out the room, and it's as if there's a presence in the room. Now, this presence is not just the presence of my own attention in the room, it is the presence of the potential of the room. So there's this, I'll just read the passage, guys. The Hupo, I don't know what the Hupo is, but Attar in this passage of his, he says, the Hupo said, your hearts congealed like ice. Okay, let's see what the Hupo is. Jesus. Thanks, translator. Because he wrote in a different language, you know. Hoopoe is a salmon pink Eurasian bird with a long down curved bill, a large erectile crest, and black and white wings and a tail. Okay, so it's a bird. Alright. That means it's the only word for it. So this bird is saying this, guys. Your heart's congealed like ice. When will you free yourself from cowardice? Since you have such a short time to live here, what difference does it make? What should you fear? The world is filth and sin, and homeless men must enter it and homeless leave again. They die as worms in squalid pain. The bird is saying this, guys, not the poet, the bird. They die as worms in squalid pain. If we must perish in this quest, that certainly is better than a life of filth and grief. In this great surge's wane, if my belief is groundless, it is right that I should die. So many heirs throng the world. Then why should we not risk this quest? To suffer blame for love is better than a life of shame. No one has reached this goal, so why appeal to those whose blindness claims it is unreal? I'd rather die deceived by dreams than give my heart to home and trade and never live. We've been and heard so much. What have we learned? Not for one moment has the self been spurned. Fools gather round and hinder our release. When will their stale, insistent whining cease? We have no freedom to achieve our goal, until from self and fools we free the soul. Wow, until from self and fools we free the soul. To be admitted past the veil, you must be dead to all the crowd considers just. Once past the veil, you understand the way from, the way is spelled with a capital W, you understand the way from which the crowd's glib courtiers blindly stray. If you have any will, leave women's stories. And even if this search for hidden glories proves blasphemy at last, be sure our quest is not mere talk but an exacting test. The fruit of love's great tree is poverty. Whoever knows this knows humility. When love has pitched his tent in someone's breast, that man despairs of life and knows no rest. Love's pain will murder him and blandly ask a surgeon's fee for managing the task. The water that he drinks brings pain. His bread is turned to blood immediately shed. This is a deep, intense poem, guys. Though he is weak, faint, feebler than an ant, love forces him to be her combatant. He cannot take one mouthful unaware that he's floundering in a sea of care. Guys, what we know for certain is that people talked a lot back in the day. But no, it's actually an epic poem. Here, I'll paste it for you. Oh, I can't. Here. Anyways, the people of this world, Attar says, Farid al-Din Attar, he says the people of this world are like the three butterflies in front of a candle's flame. The first one went closer and said, I know about love. The second one touched the flame lightly with his wings and said, I know how love's fire can burn. The third one threw himself into the heart of the flame and was consumed. He alone knows what true love is. And guys, this is one of the most incredible metaphors ever for the proper evolution of the inner realms. I feel civilization can only advance if we pilot our attention as 8 billion, not just conscious bodies, but conscious minds. Minds means the potential that that body has. That potential is so unknown that who knows, wherever you are in the world, you know, you may have a certain impression on who you are, but if we took you exactly in somewhere in the world which was right, the exact the perfect environment where you had access to all resources, you had access to all various dimensions of, let's say, satisfaction of need, up the Maslow's hierarchy, would eventually bring people to self-actualization. You know, I don't know much about Maslow's life, guys, but I know about his contribution to the subjective realm. That we have to bring a civilization that it realizes the value of why from dirt has come. Libraries of exploration. We have to care for our minds. It's not enough to just be a character in a story of your inner realm and just silently live in the world. I'm saying it's a calling to all human beings and all advanced communicators. Begin sharing your inner realms. The progression of civilization means to stay true to the inner realm while you're in the outer realm. But what that really means is that When I speak to you, I am like, okay, I have no idea who's listening, but I know that there's a stage. And what is a stage? It is a blank piece of paper. That means when I realize that when I get a piece of, like any person right now, whoever you are, just for the sake of this moment, I recommend you just do this exercise. Just find a piece of paper, and the moment you find this piece of paper, just put it on the nearest table and just start drawing lines, whatever kind of squiggly line you can. Just go with the flow of just moving the pen. Just draw random lines, you know? And just keep drawing that as I'm saying this. Just draw random lines on just a piece of paper. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Random lines, whatever you like, but just keep going. So in this exercise, you're going to notice that you have incredible freedom to draw on a blank page. And when you realize that freedom doesn't need to be taken away when you walk in stage, that's when the mind gets to roar. That means I was kind of thinking like, how can we look at the freedom of the world when we can't even see the freedom of the self? So I have freed myself from thought, and it happened years ago. But I've been kind of basking in the aftermath, wondering where civilization's heading. I feel it's like not only people outside of you don't see your eyes, you don't see the depth of them either. It's kind of like following the branches of knowledge to the core of the trunk, which is the human physicality, physical life. And then it's like our physical experience of life is rooted in an unknown soil. You can't see the roots of it, but it's there. You can't see the trust of the mind, but it's there in that moment where that person in NASA has to immediately run and immediately say some problem that has occurred with a satellite or some space station or something. You see, it's like we have to, the more advanced we are on Earth, the better the astronauts will feel. The less advanced we are, they're like, oh my God, even if we find like an advanced civilization, would we be embarrassed if we introduce it to us? An extraterrestrial civilization, would we be embarrassed as terrestrial beings? We're like, welcome to Earth. Our room's a bit messy, but it's a good place. I feel this is the thing. Right now, more than ever, this concept of the advanced communicator means that you trust your mind and learn from it. Really, there's no other option. Your mind is something that in every conscious state, in conscious waking state, is with you. Every time, right now as I'm speaking, there's one thing that's with you that's intelligent, and it's you. And if there was a time to study, let's say you wanted to study the intelligence in the cosmos, and the intelligence of the cosmos, you'd be like, oh man, how can I study the intelligence of the cosmos? And then you'd be like, okay, so you need access to something that is intelligent and something that is a part of the cosmos. And we see the only thing we have access is to our own sight. So study your sight, and then you'll notice the seer. As you abide by the seer, you'll notice the attributeless field. When you notice the attributeless field, you'll suddenly realize why I'm calling it the linguistic simulation, because it is a reverse engineering out of how all the various archetypes were projected through a mathematical multidimensional language. This is the most phenomenal thing, guys. There is a huge potential that the only way man can make contact with higher dimensions is to become it. And in becoming it, there's no past. There is no higher dimension. You're that dimension. There's another higher that arises. I feel everybody is seeing experientially way more than how language can contain life. So it's like somebody, let's say you see all these stress, and let me just search it right now. Let me just Google, I don't know how valid these statistics would be, but let's just see what comes up. Global depression statistics. Depression, World Health Organization. Oh my God, what is this? We need stats. Let me see. Maybe there's a... Okay, let's see something. So for example, this is in 2017. Oh man, these stats aren't that convenient. Here, let me see this. Why? Okay, guys, I can't find the proper stats, but it's on the rise. Rates of depression diagnosis in the US. In 2016, it's just a line that's slowly gone up. So whatever, it makes sense. The more we're overpopulated, the more the less it's like when there's an inefficient system and you add members to an inefficient system. It's like how many people can you really fit in the elevator? After some point it would stop working. So symptoms of a system that's about to stop working is a very bad user experience. So right now, many human beings are having a bad user experience of, let's say, the interface of their civilization. In the future, that will change. It will change really the moment that we realize that, kind of like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And he's like, yeah, what else can you do? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the only thing you can do. That you have to kind of like Michelangelo. He said, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. That's the secret of architecture. There's a sort of inner vision to it. There's something there before there's something there. And that's how it happens. It's an instant of trust that's the transmission. So the more you trust your moment, the more you begin to see your mind. So you gotta kind of feel like, let's say right now, you had read all the books in the world and all the greatest teachers in the world had all come around and given you their teaching. Now what then? Who would you learn from then? You know, you would realize the only thing left to learn from is you. Now Mr. Within is saying, imagine children realizing that they are observers of their own life, and when you are an observer, you get access to a spectrum where choice arises. So believe it or not, the more patient you are in situations, the more you see out of the moment, and then an action is set into motion. So for me, it's like kind of very cool, because in my youth, I kind of wanted to just burst into a certain manner, but eventually it changed into observance, you know? So I kind of feel in this life, I have, like 2011, I was completely living as through an individual conscious personhood, but beyond that, it became more like witness. A witnessing, excuse me, a witnessing mind of a changing body that has kind of, where the language of that body is technically the mind. You know, imagine this, I'm kind of like animating this, but imagine man says, God, where are you? And suddenly God, like a voice appears, a divine voice appears, and God's voice says, what is it, man? What do you want? You know? And then man says, God, why did you make all this? Like, why is all of this here? You know, and God looks at man and says, since when do I doubt myself? You know? You see, nature has a sort of it's flawless because you can't say anything, because eventually it's all about happening. They say fortune favors the bold because not a lot of people are living external lives. They're living inner lives mainly. Anyone suffering right now, you don't see the actual earth. You're actually caught in your own version of the earth. I'm not joking. When we can discriminate between the inner realms and the outer realms, that would be a huge advancement of civilization. That would be a huge advancement of anything. That means people would stop thinking, oh my God, that person is different than me. That person is like in this category, and it's, that person is like, this whole difference thing will be realized. Okay, we have different DNA, we have different inner realms, but we all exist in the same outer realm. So pretty much, it's kind of like we're all part of this multiplayer, sensory, perception-based video game, elemental projected video game. We kind of close our eyes. It's like the video game is on pause, then open our eyes, and we log back in to the personality or the personalization process of our human selfhood throughout the day. So I'm telling you, it's very fascinating. The mystery of human intelligence surpasses individualism and ideological structures. So the architect is beyond the architecture. So you can't really enjoy something when you're in it. It's like you can't enjoy the outside of a car when you're inside it, really. You know? Imagine a person that's inside the car and steps out, and they don't somehow, I don't know, maybe some people with like boards block that guy's vision. They're like, what was your opinion on just the inside of the car? And the guy says the outside was beautiful. And then the person's like, what do you mean the outside was beautiful? And you see, it's as if like that's the same way we are putting our language on the earth and solidifying truth. It's not the case. I feel that when Alfred Whitehead said life is a process, it means it's an unknown dynamism. Peace, love, Dove in the chat section, guys, says something very nice. We are the I am, seeking to become, but the BE is capitalized. That which already knows itself as the I am. Yes, but let me tell you something. Let me tell you something interesting. Because Sri Ramana Maharshi says that the ego is like a stick that you use to put all the other sticks in the fire, adjust them, then eventually that stick you throw in the fire. So the mystical yogic path is from a dissolution of an individual objective being into a pure experiential movement that is inseparable from the individual activity and the whatever rendition of cosmic activity or divine activity you consider. So pretty much the will of nature and the will of the individual, the more the person goes towards stillness and silence and that let's say deeper truth, the deeper roots of intelligence beyond the language threshold, beyond conceivable domains, the less you need you as a life force relate as a human being. So mysticism, believe it or not, is a way of kind of dying before you die, but that death is an awakening. That's why they called the Buddha the awakened one, because he was like, oh my God, there's a way out of the suffering, because of how's the suffering there in the first place. And he found the middle way, that we are the observers of reality. Morihei Shiba, the founder of Aikido, he has this incredible saying. He says something like the truth is the witnessing of the movement of the soul of chaos and order. witnessing the movement of the soul of chaos and order. That is, oh sorry, not of chaos and order, of heaven and earth. Witnessing the soul of heaven and earth as it moves. And that's another way of saying being aware of how your subjective realm and objective realm are like two eyes that see the same. Love is a moment where both the inner realms and the outer realms are validated. They are no longer at war. Anytime your inner realm and your outer realm are different in value, you're at war, and technically there's stress lingering. What that means is any moment you don't trust, that distrust will create some sort of tension. And that tension can echo subjectively. Do you know that means I remember I was in Cislago, Italy, in a hotel, and on the third floor of that hotel, yeah, I think it was Cislago, or it could have been, no, it was Cislago, and on the third floor of that, I was in this hotel on the third floor, and I was kind of like, there wasn't a smoking area, but I went. The balcony had strangely a giant window that was kind of like a door, not like a door, but like this giant glass window that would open. And then there were all these plants. There was this enough space for plants, and like there was just this sitting space, as if the person had kind of thought about it, you know. But it wasn't a safe and kind of like as a person in the hotel, I probably should have been there, you know. But it was late at night and I was tired and I was just like, so I go up there and I'm, having a smoke, and in that moment, I was having a dark night of the soul, and what that means is when you reduce your self-worth because you're not feeling well. So in that moment, I suddenly go through this, what I call it was a sort of loop of psychological self-loathing. And what happens is that I was constantly reducing. So right now in these talks, I tend to have a creative intent, but in that moment, there was a destructive intent. So it was as if me without filters, but I was diminishing my own value, you know? And so I was in that kind of loop of thought, and there was something very unique happened that I got such an insight into the nature of the human mind. It was as if my thoughts were speeding up, and I was just sitting there slowly smoking a cigarette and just having like slight tears maybe here and then, you know? But then in my inner realms, I was kind of like destroying myself. I was seeing everything I had done as meaningless and hollow, and it was like not hollow as like the rage of regret had found me in that moment, and I was constantly directing it at myself. Do you know? And so in that moment of kind of like every thought I had of myself kind of slamming it to the ground, I noticed something that, here's what happened. I remember I said it, I cursed at myself in my inner realms, you know? And then, as I was thinking, suddenly the same insult came. So I while I was in that kind of inner loop of self-loathing, I suddenly self-loathed myself twice in the same way. And I was like, whoa, I noticed it was a loop. And then I was watching how I can say my own subjective realm slowly as my texture of my attention changed, shift. So I snapped out of my depression and I started laughing. I started laughing at how in that moment my mind was fooling me, you know. The mind is an advanced instrument. And that's why I'm telling you, so many trees have not sacrificed themselves to be printer paper, so we just put them in the printer. You know, I feel we should bring old school writing back. And we should have this kind of massive collective renaissance where people right now, because the civilization appears artificial and kind of blind to its members, it's kind of like people are not caring to express externally. They're just caring for inner expression, which means they want to get what they can from the world, and that's it. They're not wondering about the endurance of the system. For example, 10,000 years from now, it's like we gotta, you know. I saw it was like in the movie Avengers, where they assembled this unique team. And so I was like, what if we have 8 billion unique minds assembled? What would be the result? There was this philosophy teacher on exam paper, on an exam, on an exam paper he wrote, um, a bonus question that was like, why not? Sorry, it was just why. WHY question mark. And so many people gave different answers, and it was brought up in class, and students were like, what is the answer? And the teacher eventually calls up the one student who got it right, and that says the answer was why not. Do you see what I mean? That means to the question why, we can give endless answers. Some people can say God, religion, the scientific lens, the philosophical lens, whatever lens of reality you can see, you can give an answer. But the best answer is why not, which is literally putting a mirror in front of chaos. And then realizing based on how chaos reacts to itself, you become the order. I feel that the logos, believe it or not, it was something that was kind of like my intuition told me a while ago. And when I say my intuition told me, it was a thought that suddenly found me out of nowhere, you know? And it was that behind every person's eyes, there are libraries. There are libraries, and that only the person can choose to share those libraries. That means do not think the external realm is so advanced that it can measure what you are. The mystery still stands. That's the value of writing. You're not just writing in a world where whatever impression you have writing, you're writing in an unknown world. And I feel every human being should at least give 10% of their lifetime towards advancing the civilization. I mean, like, and people would be like, why? And I'll be like, why not? So anyways, guys, to wrap this up, unless people have questions, and then we can hold a Q&A session. But aside from that, attention is the architect of the inner life. Your inner life is pretty much how you have processed sensory data so far into symbol attribution. So you are free because before you could be enslaved, there had to be a concept of freedom. You can't call someone a slave if they never knew anything else. I remember there was this film, they found this great warrior who was like this kid who was lost like in this planet, and he had become this incredible savage like human being, but he was a very powerful human being. The kid that was raised by a savage lifestyle with no civilization or anything. And so this kid is found, and he's kind of brought, and he goes into a battle, but at the end they realize that this being's greatest sense of harmony was to go back. It's like Tarzan, regardless of how much he put a suit and a tie on and became an insurance salesman, there was some point where he looked at trees and he's like, what am I doing? So you see, we revert back to the nature of our familiarity. But if we discover that if we somehow find an algorithm to this universe and make the unknown familiar, it is the evolution of knowledge. That means more than ever we need philosophical discussions between people. And I remember I kind of envisioned that in the future we should have pretty much any system you look at, you can add dimensions and it automatically becomes potentials of complexity at first. That means I'm kind of like seeing potentials to our civilization and just talking about it. I'm going to read one more quote from Attar, guys, and I'll just keep it simple. Pretty much your attention can change many things. So check this out. This poem is called A King Who Placed Mirrors in His Palace, and it's from The Conference of the Birds, again by Farid al-Din Attar, this poet, mystic poet. He says there lived a king. His comeliness was such, the world could not acclaim his charm too much. The world is, the world, like Comelinness. There lived a king, his comeliness was such, the world could not acclaim his charm too much. The world's wealth seemed a portion of his grace. It was a miracle to view his face. If he had rivals, then I know of none. The earth resounded with this paragon. When riding through his streets, he did not fail to hide his features with a scarlet veil. Whoever scanned the veil would lose his head. Whoever spoke his name was left for dead. The tongue ripped from his mouth. Whoever thrilled with passion for this king was quickly killed. 1,000 for his love expired each day, and those who saw his face in blank dismay would rave and grieve and mourn their lives away. To die for love of that bewitching sight was worth 100 lives without his light. None could survive his absence patiently. None could endure this king's proximity. How strange it was that man could neither brook the presence nor the absence of his look. Since few could bear his sight, they were content to hear the king in sober argument. But while they listened, they endured such pain as made them long to see their king again. The king commanded mirrors to be placed about the palace walls, and when he faced their polished surfaces, his image shone with mitigated splendor to the throne. If you would glimpse the beauty we revere, look in your heart, its image will appear. Make of your heart a looking glass, and see reflected there the friend's nobility. Your sovereign glory will illuminate the palace where he reigns in proper state. Search for this king within your heart. His soul reveals itself in atoms to the whole, WHOLE, to the whole. The multitude of forms that masquerade throughout the world spring from the Seymour shade. The Seymour, guys, is pretty much the phoenix in Persian mythology that lived through 3 apocalypses. Throughout the world spring from the Seymour shade. If you catch sight of his magnificence, it is his capital H, it is his shadow that beguiles your glance. The Seymour shadow and himself are one. Seek them together, twinned in unison. But you are lost in vague uncertainty. Pass beyond shadows to reality. How can you reach the Seymour's splendid court? First find its gateway, and the sun, long sought, erupts through clouds when victory is won. Your sight knows nothing but the blinding sun. Wow. This man is like, if the soul was a lion, he's roaring like mad. Attar says, if you will but aspire, you will attain to all that you desire. Before an atom of such need, the sun seems dim and murky by comparison. Before an atom of such need, the sun seems dim and murky by comparison. It is life's strength, the wings by which we fly beyond the further reaches of the sky. Farid al-Din Attar, one last thing I'm going to read, he says, had I known how listening is superior to speaking, I would not have wasted my life preaching. Yeah, you know, I could totally understand that in Attar's time, but in 2020, where this civilization is the only attempt towards perceiving what the advance could be like, it's like, yeah, right now more than ever, this concept I created, I say hunter-gatherer of the inner realms. You need to explore your inner realms and share it as art to the world. And we share it as art, like literally what the person can't confront, just say it's art. I'm telling you, because art is just the new. And to notice the new and to bring forth it, it's kind of like time travel in your inner realms. It's parallel witnessing of various subjective relationships, or how certain subjects are linked to objects. So what that means is when you look at a picture, you get the memory of your loved one. So what that means is your mind simulates that emotion again, as if the mind is your mind loves you. And it's as if the mind, the moment the person misses someone, just suddenly allows the person to bask in the memories. It's fascinating, really. So anyways, guys, I hope this talk has served you. Much blessings and namaste. Blessings, peace, love, and love, and thank you for your donation. It's I believe it's such a cool time to be alive, because we are just real. It's literally like the X-Men, but we're realizing all our DNA is unique. That means I'm telling you, in all of mysticism, there had to have a transmission system through a guru and disciple thing. But let me tell you this: that's old school. That's like fax machine technology. It's that the whole point of all the external gurus ever on this planet was to make you realize the inner guru. Because if you followed the external guru, if you didn't realize the inner guru, you'd be following someone else. I am telling, your mind is as fascinating as everything you have ever perceived as part of it. Let us hear the roars of the ever-present ability of our species. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Blessings.